Life in Nottingham had always been pretty straightforward for me. Ewan Fletcher, 34 years old and just trying to make my way. I worked a decent job, nothing fancy, just enough to keep my small flat warm and comfortable. My world, the real important bit anyway, was my son Leo. He was 2 years old, full of energy, and every laugh, every messy kiss, every tiny hand reaching for mine was everything to me. He was the best thing that ever happened to me, pure joy in a complicated world. His mum, Sarah, and I had broken up a while back. It wasn't pretty. There was a lot of arguing, misunderstanding, and frankly, I felt like I was constantly letting her down or not giving her what she wanted, no matter how hard I tried. She was always looking for more, always comparing our lives to others, and eventually it just fell apart. We agreed, or at least I thought we agreed, to be civil for Leo, to make sure he had both parents involved. My value, the thing I held dearest, was being a present father, a constant in Leo's life. I dreamt of teaching him to kick a football in the park, helping him with homework years from now, just being there for all the big and small moments. That dream was everything. Then came the day that everything shattered. Sarah just stopped letting me see him regularly. Phone calls went unanswered, texts ignored for days. When she did reply, it was usually demanding money way beyond what we'd agreed or making some vague accusation about me. The worst was when she just flat out said, "I don't think it's good for Leo right now," with no explanation, no timeline, just a cold door slammed in my face. My boy, my Leo, and I couldn't see him, couldn't hold him. It was like a physical ache in my chest, a constant, dull pain that flared into sharp agony every time I saw a photo of him or remembered his little giggle. I was shocked, then heartbroken, then the anger started to simmer. How could she use our son like this? How could she keep me away from him? That's when I knew I couldn't just sit back and take it. This wasn't just about a breakup anymore. This was about my right to be a father and Leo's right to have his dad. I decided right then, sitting alone in my quiet flat, that I would fight. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I would fight for my son, and if that meant making things very difficult for Sarah, then so be it. She had forced my hand. My first attempts were soft, hopeful even. I sent texts pleading with her, reminding her what we'd agreed, asking about Leo, begging for just an hour with him. I offered to meet her anywhere, bring whatever she needed for him, promised not to cause any trouble. My efforts were met with silence, or worse, short, sharp replies demanding ridiculous sums of money, like she was punishing me financially for daring to ask to see my child. "You want to see him? Pay up," one text read. It felt like a punch to the gut. It became clear negotiation was useless. She wasn't interested in co-parenting. She was interested in control and making my life difficult. The obstacles were her complete lack of cooperation and her using money as a weapon. Then the complications started multiplying. She got a solicitor involved, a real sharp one by the sounds of it. I got a formal letter, cold and official, outlining her terms for access and child maintenance, terms that were frankly impossible for me to meet without working 3 jobs and never sleeping. The letter twisted things, implying I was unreliable, that I hadn't supported them, painting a picture that was completely untrue. It was a shock, reading those lies on paper. I felt sick. I had to get my own legal advice, which meant dipping into the small savings I had put aside for maybe a deposit on a slightly bigger place one day, a place where Leo could have his own room. The stakes were rising dramatically. It wasn't just about seeing Leo anymore. It was about potentially losing my financial stability and fighting against formal accusations. The problems multiplied. Her solicitor sent more letters, each one increasing the pressure, demanding financial disclosures that felt invasive and accusatory. I started getting calls from friends of friends, people I barely knew, asking if everything was okay, mentioning things Sarah had apparently said about me being irresponsible. It felt like she was trying to isolate me, damage my reputation. The stress was immense. I struggled to focus at work, sleep became a luxury, and the constant knot in my stomach was my new normal. There were days I'd walk past the park where I used to take Leo, and the emptiness felt overwhelming. The dark moment came after a particularly brutal exchange of emails between our solicitors. Mine forwarded me Sarah's latest demands and accusations, things so far from the truth it made my head spin. She claimed I was unstable, that my flat wasn't suitable for overnight stays, even hinting that I was a bad influence. It felt like everything I valued, everything I was fighting for, was slipping away. The legal costs were mounting, the emotional toll was crushing, and I still hadn't seen Leo properly in months, just a few heavily supervised, awkward visits that felt more like interrogations. I sat there staring at the emails, feeling utterly defeated. Was it worth it? Could I even win against this level of hostility and manipulation? Doubt crept in, cold and heavy. Maybe she was right, maybe I couldn't do this. Maybe it was hopeless. That was my lowest point. But then I looked at a photo of Leo on my phone, his bright, trusting eyes, and something shifted. I couldn't give up. He needed me. Giving up wasn't just letting Sarah win, it was abandoning my son. That thought galvanized me. I realized I had to stop reacting and start planning. My final plan was simple: use the truth, meticulously documented, to expose her unfairness and prove my capability and willingness as a father. I started gathering every scrap of evidence I had, screenshots of her demanding texts and my polite replies, records of the money I had given her previously, a journal detailing every cancelled visit, every broken promise, every time she had used Leo as leverage. I worked closely with my solicitor, a quiet but sharp woman who listened patiently and believed my story. My strategy wasn't about destroying Sarah, it was about presenting a factual case to the court that showed her behavior was unreasonable, damaging to Leo's relationship with me, and primarily motivated by malice or greed rather than his best interests. The revenge wouldn't be something I inflicted directly, it would be the natural consequence of her own actions being laid bare before the law. The climactic confrontation wasn't a shouting match, but a tense day in the family court. It was clinical, sterile, but the stakes felt higher than anything I'd ever faced. My solicitor presented our evidence calmly, piece by piece. The screenshots showed her demands, the journal entries painted a clear picture of her preventing access without just cause. Her solicitor tried to counter, repeating the accusations from the letters, trying to paint me as unreliable. But under cross-examination, Sarah's story started to unravel. When asked about specific texts, specific dates I was denied access, she became flustered, contradictory. Her attempt to portray me as a deadbeat dad crumbled against the weight of the documented truth and my solicitor's quiet, persistent questions. The immediate aftermath was quiet but heavy. The judge delivered their ruling. It was fair. They established a clear, generous access schedule for me, recognizing my commitment and Sarah's unreasonable behavior. The child maintenance order was significantly less than she had demanded, calculated based on realistic figures, and implicitly acknowledging that her request had been excessive. The judge spoke about the importance of both parents being involved and the need for cooperation, a clear reprimand directed at Sarah, though not explicitly named as such. I watched Sarah's face as the judgment was read out, the shock, then the dawning realization that her plan had backfired completely. She had pushed too hard, lied too much, and the system, slow and frustrating as it had been, had seen through it. The resolution didn't feel like a victory parade. It felt like a heavy burden finally being lifted. My new normal involved packing a bag for Leo's visits, planning our time together without the constant fear of cancellation, and paying a manageable amount of child maintenance. I had secured my place in Leo's life. Looking back, the pain of the fight was immense, but the justice served wasn't just about getting back at Sarah. It was about protecting my son and protecting my right to be his father. She had tried to weaponize Leo and the law against me, and in the end, it was her own actions that brought about the consequences she faced. I learned that fighting for what's right, even when it's incredibly hard, is the only way forward. The peace that followed wasn't the absence of conflict, but the quiet assurance that I had done everything I could for my son, and now, finally, we could just get on with being a family, albeit a different kind of family than I had once imagined.